This man thought he was living a fairy tale. His 8-year marriage seemed solid, built on years of friendship and unwavering love. But it all began to crumble on a seemingly ordinary night with an unexpected conversation about monogamy and new possibilities. What seemed like a pact of trust quickly turned into an emotional minefield. His wife found a new partner very quickly, and now he wonders, had he been deceived by the one he loved most? Apologies for the length, but I feel all these details are necessary. I am a 30-year-old man married to my 29-year-old wife for 8 years. We dated for just over a year before that, and were friends for about 3 years before that. We have a 17-month-old daughter who already has me completely wrapped around her little finger. Let me start by saying that I truly love my wife. I would characterize our relationship and marriage, up until the past few weeks, as epic. This is a difficult story to tell. About 2 months ago, I had a strange and surprising conversation with my wife. We were sitting on the couch after putting our little one to bed and having dinner, which included a few glasses of wine. It's worth noting this, when she brought up the topic of monogamy and having an open or semi-open relationship. It was a long and unexpected conversation, but the summary and final points agreed upon were: we felt that our love for each other was stronger than ever, unshakable. We felt that our relationship had reached a point where it transcended traditional norms of monogamy, that either of us could potentially engage with someone else, and it wouldn't impact the foundation of our relationship or our love. We agreed that if circumstances arose where either of us wanted to have an experience with someone else, it would be allowed as long as it didn't interfere with the time we spent together with our daughter, or detract from our emotional capacity for one another. If that happened, we'd need to be completely honest and secure about it, no secrets. We both would have veto power at any time over a specific person, circumstance, or the idea as a whole. Or so I thought. Keep in mind that none of this had come up in 8 years of marriage and over 12 years together. At the time, I remember feeling a bit baffled that we were even having this conversation and surprised that my wife had initiated all of it. I had several girlfriends before meeting my wife, but she was the first woman I slept with. She, on the other hand, had been sexually active from a young age with multiple partners. At that moment, I couldn't help but feel like I had received a golden ticket. I was raised in a very conservative Baptist household and was indoctrinated with a lot of nonsense about abstinence. Proud to have escaped the church matrix 10 years ago, I must admit I carried a small regret about missing out on playing the field sexually in college and thinking I'd never have that opportunity again. I had just been handed a free pass to do something about it if I chose without any consequences. I left that conversation with newfound respect for our marriage and how cool we were. Fast forward to the next day. I woke up, shook off the cobwebs, and had one of those "what the hell just happened" moments. My stomach felt like it was made of lead. Deep down, I felt like all of this was wrong and needed to be undone, but I didn't want to say anything yet. I remembered all the programming from church camp in my youth and wondered if it was just doubt bubbling to the surface. I decided to take a few days to process all this information and think about it a lot. Both of us lead very busy lives, so I thought I had some time to think it through before taking any action. Oops. About a week or less after our conversation, my wife came home after going to a cafe to do some work. She was acting very strange and nervous when she got home, and I started to feel very strange and nervous as a result. I asked her who was there with her, and she told me it was a friend of a friend, someone we both knew and had met about 2 months before. I was a bit shocked to know that she had acted on our agreement so quickly. This is where our versions of the events diverge significantly. I say that at that moment, I made it clear that I wasn't as comfortable with all of this as I initially thought I would be, and that I wanted to undo everything. I asked if anything had happened, and she said no, but that it was probably heading in that direction, and that she was attracted to him, and he was attracted to her. I made it clear that I didn't like this guy she went to meet and didn't want her to see him again. She assured me everything was fine and repeatedly said, "You have nothing to worry about between me and X. which I interpreted as confirmation that the whole idea was discarded, or at least she wasn't going to be involved with X that night. Mentally, I sighed with relief and felt like we had dodged a bullet. I basically concluded, regardless of this event, that our marriage was too important to me to risk damaging it. I was 99% sure our marriage could continue to work without any significant interruption, guilt, anger, or jealousy if one of us slept with someone else. But the potential harm of that 1% chance was too big of a risk to take. In other words, our marriage was great, so why risk it? If the story ended there, I would wish I could go back to that night and explicitly say, "No, I don't agree with this arrangement." I wasn't thinking clearly when I agreed to it, and I'm really happy with a traditional monogamous relationship, but thanks for the offer. Last night, I indirectly discovered that my wife's interpretation of that last conversation was completely different from mine. She says that when she said, "You have nothing to worry about between me and X," what she meant was that this would continue, but it wouldn't affect her love for me or our everyday marriage. She's been sleeping with him for at least a few weeks, sometime after our last conversation about it. I couldn't bring myself to ask for the details, so I don't know how many times exactly. I'm not sure if I want to know. Looking back at the entire series of events, I can't help but wonder if this is all an elaborate way of getting me to authorize an affair. After all, there was little opportunity for me to sleep with someone else. All my time is spent at the office or at home. My wife, on the other hand, has 3 days a week at home alone, working as a freelance writer, and the timing of everything is more than suspicious. She firmly claims that this is not the case, and that how quickly she took advantage of our agreement was purely a coincidence. Today, I was a complete mess and completely useless at work. I feel betrayed and completely empty. I went home for a while and talked to my wife. I asked her what she would do if I said I wanted all of this to end and for things to go back to how they were before any of this happened, and that she wouldn't see X anymore. Her response was, "Well, I think I really wouldn't have a choice. I think I would, but I wouldn't like it. I'm really lost about what to do now. I'm struggling to understand how upset I have the right to be. Should I consider this an affair or cheating? Is this just an epic communication failure? Am I being a stupid baby? Because she was the first, and I should just suck it up and hold on to my golden ticket. Help me out, here's a summary. My wife and I agreed to an open relationship. She brought it up. I changed my mind and thought I made it clear, but her interpretation was different. Now she's sleeping with another guy and seems reluctant to change things. Now update 1. Thanks to everyone for the comments so far. Writing about this is cathartic. Here are some updates, comments, and clarifications. It seems there is a clear consensus that the communication was terrible in this. I don't disagree, and I deeply regret not being more specific in our first conversation, and especially in the follow-up conversation when I really started to lose it. Honestly, at the time, I thought such specificity wasn't necessary. Not because I thought clear engagement rules in an open relationship weren't important, but because all of this was such a huge surprise that it really disarmed me in many ways. I assumed, incorrectly and stupidly, I thought she should feel as strange and wrong about all of this as I did. I've definitely learned my lesson about this. There will be no gray areas or indecision on the subject from now on. I can say with 99.9% certainty that my wife was not involved with this guy before our initial conversation. She hadn't even met him until a month or 2 before that and had little chance to interact with him. She categorically swears that nothing physical happened between them until it was allowed. However, she admitted last night that she had thought about it. I can say with 99.999% certainty that my wife has never cheated on me with anyone since the beginning of our relationship up until now. You'll have to believe me on this, although I now wonder, after our last conversation, how much of it was due to unfavorable logistical circumstances versus desire. We talked again last night, and here are the highlights and low points. She refuses to characterize this as cheating or any kind of mistake on her part and basically says that this is what we agreed on and that I'm freaking out because it would always be difficult for whoever was the second. and that person would inevitably have doubts. She apologized for the miscommunication in our second conversation and says that if she had thought what I meant was that I wasn't okay with the whole thing, she wouldn't have gone ahead with it. She insists that she really thought I had approved everything. At one point I told her, "I don't want to share you." She responded, "That's your choice. You're not my owner." I asked her to tell me if she needed this kind of lifestyle to be happy in the future, if this was something she wanted or needed, or if she was just feeling particularly experimental or horny lately. And the situation got out of control. I asked many direct questions about this topic and got a new version of the truth. She says her desire for an open relationship has been growing for some time, maybe years. More recently, she felt that I would be open to the idea. She categorically states that this has nothing to do with my emotional or sexual inadequacy. She still categorically claims that her love for me hasn't changed and points to examples of her behavior in the last month and how things have actually improved between us. She admits that this is probably a behavioral pattern of hers and says that she doubts it could change, but hoped to find a safe way to do this with me. When I asked why all this is coming up now after years of marriage, she said she had been feeling increasingly restless in recent years, but kept blaming other things, life stresses, stress from having a baby, etc. She says that if it came down to a choice, she would return to strict monogamy. However, she says she wouldn't be happy and isn't sure if it would be sustainable. She continues to say she thinks this is what I really want to, that I'm just scared, and that if I give it some time, I'll calm down and adapt. She points out that in our initial conversation I agreed, and if I was really against the idea, I would have said so from the beginning. I'm not sure she's right, but it's hard for me to argue. I'm still completely confused. On one hand, I feel like my wife manipulated this situation in her favor, and I feel thrown aside. On the other hand, if this is really what she wants and needs, shouldn't I find some comfort in the fact that she tried to get me to agree? Now I feel like I only have two options. One, I can try this open relationship and see if I can actually handle having multiple sexual partners, but still maintain a normal family life at the end of the day, or two, take preventive legal action without any warning. From what she said, it doesn't seem like a return to how things were before would work. She says I'm the most important thing in her life and would do this if I wanted it, but in the same breath, she says she wouldn't be happy and that it's not what she wants. I think this is the classic scenario that married people constantly face. Someone has to sacrifice. I just never thought the sacrifice someone would have to make would be their overall happiness, and the stakes would be the marriage itself. Life really sucks right now. Update 2. I've delayed responding with an update because I really don't have anything positive to add, and everything is very depressing. Anyway, here it is. I'll try not to make this a soap opera this time, but no guarantees. We're still together, and I haven't taken any steps toward divorce besides making it clear that I'm running out of options, and this is my last one. I've had a few more discussions with my wife since the last update. Every time we talk, there's a new version of the truth, new revelations about her motivation for doing this, when the desire to be with other people started, etc. The latest version is that she's always been like this, but managed to keep it a secret and ignore it for almost our entire marriage. But in the last year or two, she's felt trapped and lifeless. The notion of this deeply irritates me, but more on that later. And this, combined with the general stresses of life, was the catalyst that led to the current state of things. Some other facts and perceptions from my side. It seems she really thought I had authorized her to go ahead with the relationship. She seems more concerned with this than anything else, denying the idea that this came from manipulation. Or maybe she really thought I approved everything. Or maybe she's so mentally disturbed that she convinced herself this is the truth. She still emphasizes that nothing has changed between us from her perspective, and that she still loves me and wants to be with me, mainly with me. To use a term of endearment, she definitely keeps saying, paraphrasing, "If you tried, you'd see that it's no big deal and know there's nothing to worry about." She acknowledges that she realizes this is hurting me, but continues anyway. Basically, I think she thinks I'll get over this. Almost 2 weeks after my last update, I put into writing everything I was feeling and everything I wanted, so there would be no misunderstandings or misinterpretations of my feelings and intentions. I ended it, stating that I wanted only 3 things. 1, our relationship to be whatever the hell it is. 2, to get into marriage therapy as soon as possible. And 3, for all contact with X to end. I left the letter downstairs and left the house for a while because I didn't want to be there when she read it. When I came back, there was about 30 minutes of silence, with her just sitting there. Finally, we started talking, and to summarize, she agreed that she couldn't rule out the possibility of having an early midlife crisis, but needed time to think. I said okay to that. My parents were coming to town the next day for a 4-day visit. Great timing. So, for the next 4 days, I had to put on my happy face and pretend everything was fine. After my parents went back home, we revisited everything. And to summarize, it was during that conversation that I discovered she really hadn't thought or wasn't able to accept that she had done something fundamentally wrong. She revealed that she had ended things with X the day after receiving the letter. That was a key exchange for me because I realized she really hadn't thought or wasn't able to accept that she had done something fundamentally wrong. She wasn't going to change. If she did, it would only be out of fear of losing our daughter or the security and love of our family. She resented me for that. At least she really believes that this is not as important as I make it seem, and that if I went along with it, I would agree later. After trying to do it on my own, there were some moments when I was on the verge of saying, "Go screw yourself, it's over." But in the end, I basically agreed with everything again. Serious lack of courage, I guess, maybe. But that wasn't how I felt at the time. Here's the thing that makes all of this so bad. I love my daughter to death, and I love my life with my family. When my wife isn't with some hipster jerk, I don't want this to end. Less for me, more for my daughter. I can honestly say that if my daughter didn't exist, I'd probably be betting on how my divorce proceedings were going and how I would try to get the majority of our assets due to the circumstances. But I don't want my daughter to grow up having to split time between 2 parents and wondering why she doesn't live with a normal family. I didn't grow up like that. My wife did, which is another thing that pisses me off. Her parents had an ugly divorce, and that marked her. You'd think she'd be less likely to destroy our marriage. My parents are still married and have been for almost 40 years. I want that for my children, even if it's a huge sacrifice on my part. The really sick thing is that I wonder if my wife doesn't realize this and is using this fact against me. She knows I'm the type of person who forgives quickly, takes a long time to blame, and generally tries to make everyone around me feel better. Is she using this against me consciously or recently? Maybe. But what can I do? I kind of feel like I'm in the position of the Soviets when they suddenly landed an invasion force on the East Coast. The military leaders would immediately have called for a full nuclear strike, but that would mean ending everything. Is it worth winning and protecting yourself in principle at the cost of everything? These are the questions I've been struggling with. I started all of this by saying I love my wife, and that's still true. For the past 8 years, she has been my best friend. You'd probably think, reading all of this, that there must be something fundamentally wrong with our relationship. But honestly, I can't identify anything. We've had the normal stresses of life and having a child, but nothing revolutionary. We've lived a comfortable life, not rich, but definitely not poor. We've always made time for each other and shared many interests and activities. It was great, her words, not just mine. My wife works a flexible, at-home job and has always had the freedom to pursue any non-sexual interest, hobby, or friendship she wanted. We waited years before trying to have children, and only when we both decided it was okay. Really, I wanted children more than she did. Maybe that has something to do with it. I suppose the suddenness of all this is one of the things that made me act slowly, reluctant to label it as heartless and just move on. It just doesn't make sense to me. Why would someone who has everything risk everything like this? The only answers I can come up with are either she really wants this, and this would truly make her happy, or she's really mentally disturbed and needs help. I'm not sure what to do with either of these scenarios. It doesn't help that from her perspective, It may seem like I'm changing my mind all the time and can't decide what I want. So far, I've agreed in principle to the idea of a semi-open relationship, and I've backed out twice. My agreement is always reluctant, however, and only when it comes down to a choice between surrender or divorce. The ramifications of making the decision to divorce after 8 years are hard to bear. It would be easier if it were just the two of us dealing with the consequences. I'm still alternating between numbness, anger, depression, and life being okay, occasionally. Mostly numbness lately. I've had some very low moments in the past few weeks. Sleep isn't going well. I don't have much of an escape from any of this, just one friend with whom I feel comfortable sharing all of this. So, I thank you editors for taking the time to read and comment, even if it's just a joke or to tell me to shut up and erase the update. 3 last updates. This is a continuation and update of the saga I started here. Venting all of this has been helping my sanity, so I thank you again for the comments and suggestions. It's been well over a month since I posted the last update. Here's what's happened since then. Below is a wall of text. If you can get through it, there will be cake. Also, in case you missed it and don't want to read the subsequent sections, I'm 30, my wife is 29, and we've been married for 8 years. Shortly after posting my last update, I finally gave my wife an ultimatum. I clearly stated that things couldn't continue like this, and if she didn't stop seeing her boyfriend and immediately enter marriage therapy, it would be over. She agreed. She seemed to have a very indifferent attitude about everything when I asked her. She said she wanted to resolve our differences and fix our relationship, but only if I asked directly. Even then, she seemed more bothered than anything else. Her attitude towards me and our daily interactions became extremely cold from that point on. Basically, all signs of affection ceased. Conversations, unless directly initiated and sustained by me, stopped. Simple things like a comforting touch on the arm or a kiss on the cheek when I left for work ended. She would reciprocate if I hugged her, but there was tension and an overall sense of discomfort in everything. She seemed to wear an aura of "I'm here because I have to be." We did 7 weeks of therapy, 5 together and 2 separate sessions. The therapy itself was a mix of emotions. Most of the sessions revolved around how we got here, what broke in our relationship, and how to fix it and prevent it from happening again. Of course, most of this seems to be my fault, at least according to my wife. In my previous posts, I talked about how her history contributed to why this was happening and what her true intentions and desires were. They kept changing. In therapy, it became completely about my shortcomings in the marriage. Her interpretation was that she had been unhappy for some time because I was constantly depressed or in a bad mood due to my situation at work, which I hated. To provide context, I've been working in corporate jobs from 9 to 5 since I graduated from college in 2003, related to software. They're definitely not my passion in life, and I've been seeking an escape from the corporate rat race for some time. It's true that this has made me really unhappy at times in the past, but not constantly depressed or irritable. It was an occasional mood state that could last a few days, at most a few months. In my previous job, which I came to truly hate for a variety of reasons, she became very defensive and hostile when I pointed out in therapy that my job provided us with the stability to live comfortably and support our family. She works as a freelancer for much less money, with unpredictable income and no benefits. She also claimed that I spent too much time on other hobbies and that we were growing apart. I strongly disagreed with this. I've always been very careful with the time I spent alone or with other friends, and I rarely went a week without most of my free time being spent at home or with my wife. The proportion definitely changed in recent years. I acquired some hobbies that she had no interest in, but overall, I felt we maintained a high level of interaction beyond incidental daily contact. We spent time together at home, went out together, had dates, everything you expect from a healthy relationship. There were moments, especially when I was depressed, when I isolated myself and wanted to be more alone. I think that's how I am with everything. She pointed out that I was depressed about my job, spending less time with her, being emotionally distant or unavailable. There was always an element of truth in that, and that made it difficult to argue. The best lies are those that are partially true. I think part of what she said was partially true or had been true at some point, but it was always exaggerated and taken to the extreme. Nothing she invented could explain the collapse of the last few months, however. When I tried to refute or contradict anything she said, or direct the conversation or therapy to let's talk about why you gave up on our marriage, she became evasive and now denies that she did anything wrong or needs to fix anything. She became almost enraged. She didn't want to listen and didn't admit or acknowledge anything. She really saw it as, this is what you do, you just argue with me? That's what I heard at the start of the first session. The first thing the therapist wanted to know was the status of her relationship with Mr. X. Her literal response was, well, that's definitely on hold. Notice it wasn't over, it was on hold. She's a master of words and definitely chose those words intentionally. I didn't point this out at the time, I just kept it in my mind, more on that later. By the end of the third session, it became clear that the only way I could make any progress was to primarily focus on what went wrong and how we talk a lot about me being stuck in a career rut and what I could do to fix that or have a more positive perspective on it. We talked a lot about communicating better, setting aside time to express complaints and not letting emotions build up. We talked about communicating things clearly and not being passive-aggressive, all good things. I hoped she would take more responsibility for all of this, that she would open up to the idea of reconciliation and eventually admit, at least voluntarily, that she was just as guilty as I was and had things she needed to change. Hey, maybe I'd even get a sincere apology, one can dream. But things at home weren't improving. They weren't getting worse, so to speak, but she was cold and robotic about everything. There was no conversation initiated by her, other than absolutely necessary. And if I tried to talk about things, she would get very irritated very quickly. I'd ask, you want things to improve, right? And I wouldn't get an answer, no answer, but a non-committal political response like, well, I'm going to therapy with you, right? And sometimes, just, I don't know how I feel, I just need some time to go through this, okay? I could handle that. This has been a traumatic journey, so it made sense, I guess. Maybe I was rushing things, expecting too much too quickly. Back to the first therapy session, it's definitely on hold. Imagine mentally a rage cartoon approaching on hold. Yep, that's it. So, about 3 weeks into therapy, I couldn't stand being paranoid anymore. I noticed that she had started keeping a tight grip on her phone. It never left her side, and that wasn't normal for her. Additionally, one day I bumped into her laptop, messing with it, and noticed it was now password protected. Could there be something going on here? After everything that had happened so far, I didn't trust that she would tell me the truth if I asked directly. So I did what any good nerd with no other choice would do. I logged into her email through the server. She forgot that the domain and the email were set up and maintained by me. It turns out she was still talking to Mr. X and had been doing so almost daily. There was no smoking gun there, like, hey, let's meet up, your husband's an idiot, lol. But the general tone of the emails was more than just exchanging links to funny cat videos. There were I love yous exchanged, evidence that she was talking to Mr. X about how things were going with our marriage. A flood of rage and overwhelming sadness. The worst part was that I couldn't just confront her about it. And although I think it was justified, I went into her personal email without her knowledge and would have preferred for her to incriminate herself. I managed to bring it up in conversation a week later. So I noticed you've been very protective of your phone. Also, it's bothering me what you said about it being on hold with Mr. X in therapy. Are you still talking to him? After some stammering, she responded that he was still in contact with her, but that it was just him sending random links to random news articles. She said she was protecting her phone because she was worried I'd see a text from him pop up and think the wrong thing. I knew that this, at best, was a huge exaggeration of the truth, but I didn't show it. I brought it up at the end of our next therapy session. The therapist seemed slightly surprised by my wife's response when I started addressing the issue. It was eye-roll worthy. We're doing this again. We haven't moved much beyond that. We didn't get very far after that because our time was up. Outside the therapist's office, her nature returned to being cold and robotic. She didn't bring up the subject. When I tried, she became defensive and angry. This is all it's about for you, isn't it? I dropped the subject and continued to monitor her email. I still haven't found anything incriminating indicating that she's having a physical relationship with this person, but it's obviously possible. I can't see the messages she's sending, and I know a lot of it's happening through text messages or Facebook, which I don't have access to. So, I'm only seeing part of what's going on when I'm not around. It's also possible, I think, that she thinks it's acceptable to continue a relationship, platonic, with this person and see the exchange of means. Hi, how are you? How are things? How harmless can this be? It might just be me trying to justify her behavior, something that seems to be a habit of mine. So, that's it. My wife still has a relationship with him, even knowing that I'm not okay with it. It might be platonic, but I really don't know. She doesn't seem very interested in fixing things or improving things. When cornered, she claims she wants to, but only if asked directly. Even then, it's often a vague response. The only happiness she shows is when we're playing together with our daughter. I feel like I've done everything I could do. I'm still holding on to threads of hope, but maybe it's time to let go. Is there any hope of saving this? At this point, she still says, "I love you," but only in response when I say it, and my own "I love you" is starting to sound emptier and emptier. Has anyone here ever been in a relationship so distant with someone who clearly isn't in love with you anymore, is actively deceiving and hurting you, and managed to save it? Thank you, H, for the update. What the hell? Well, I guess I don't need to worry about what to do anymore. I just found out that she's still sleeping with that idiot. Really sad. Actually, I got a message from her mother saying that she needs to stop sleeping with Mr. X and is worried that she might catch an STD and pass it to me and then lose our daughter. He sleeps with multiple people apparently. I guess I also have to get tested now and speed up the legal matters. Life sucks. I think I made a really bad choice 8 years ago. Or maybe an alien parasite is inhabiting and controlling my wife's body. I wish the latter were true, as I could probably find a solution for that. But I can't time travel. This story didn't have more updates, but the poster responded to a question on Ask Reddit. When did you realize your marriage was over? And this response gives us a little more understanding of what happened next. See here the response. For me, the last straw was reading an intercepted email from my mother-in-law to my now ex-wife, in which she expressed her concern that my ex might get an STD from the idiot she was secretly with and the impact that could have on the custody of our daughter. 1.5 years later, I'm a much happier man, divorced, and in a good relationship with a mentally stable woman. Also, in response to a comment asking about his daughter, basically, custody is split 50-50ths. Technically, my ex has primary custody. She fought for that so she could get child support, despite having a job that pays approximately the same as mine, and we share time with our daughter approximately 50-50ths. I wish I could go back and do the divorce and custody process again, knowing what I know now about the process and how grossly unfavorable it is for men. This brings us to the end of this story. I fully believe that the wife planned that initial conversation to happen while the author was under the influence of alcohol. The author clearly vetoed Mr. X as per their agreement, and the wife just pretended it didn't happen. Regardless of her reasons for changing her mind about monogamy, she was absolutely being manipulative to get what she wanted. It's true that the author wasn't firm enough with his boundaries, but when you have a highly manipulative partner, you question your own feelings and reality. But one thing is clear, this marriage was doomed. Also, opening a relationship that started as closed is always a bad idea. They never work. What did you think of this story? What would your advice be for the author? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, show your support for the channel by leaving a like and a comment. Thank you for the support. Thank you all for watching until the end, and Merry Christmas to all of you